met Ted. Mike, you're one of our speakers. You want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Mike Friedman. I have been doing online marketing since about 2003, 2004, when Google first released Google AdWords out of their beta phase. Back then it was kind of the wild, wild west, but I got started building my own sites and selling products as an affiliate. And I was doing SEO without even knowing it was called SEO. Eventually, I realized that I am an absolutely horrible employee and I needed to quit my job and go work for myself. So that's what I did. I started a company, it was called the SEO Pub, and focused primarily on obviously SEO, pay-per-click ads, email marketing, web design, pretty much anything somebody wanted to do online. And last year I rebranded, it's now called Clicked Marketing, because SEO just kind of pigeonholed us too much. I'd get questions all the time asking if we did Google ads and Facebook ads and things like that. So my real passion online is really helping businesses to generate traffic wherever it's coming from. Generating targeted traffic is what I really find enjoyable. Before this, I used to work for a bank and did a lot of business banking. And I don't care what any banker tells you. Hopefully there's no bankers in the room, but they really can't do a lot to help your business grow. And that was one thing that always frustrated me. You know, the only people that they want to lend money to are really the people that don't need money in the first place. And that was the one thing that I loved when I changed to this line of work is I can really see the impact I can have with customers on their bottom line. And that's where my passion is with it. So looking forward to answering your questions today. And I know your first question, and yes, it is a Cobra Kai t-shirt that he's wearing.
So good.
That's cool.
Daniel LaRusso was the real bully in the movie.
So Tommy, tell us all about you.
So I see some parallels to Mike with the PPC stuff. I actually have been working in tech most of my career before I went off to do this. Spent 7 years with Advanced Market Devices. You may have heard of them. They're an Intel competitor, the smaller fish in a big pond. After doing that, while I was there, I started working on websites and what at the time we called one-to-one marketing. It's basically what CRM does today. But it was just an infant concept, and we were just trying to figure out, okay, how can we actually speak to customers in a way that's relevant to them versus just blasting them? Because we were literally sending out emails with everyone in blind carbon copy. And one day, one of our channel folks accidentally carbon copied hundreds of people and sent out all their email addresses to everyone else. And it was a huge fiasco. So we had this whole task force. Anyway, ended up getting involved in the website then, and SEO didn't exist as it does today. It was just build a website and Google's going to show it to people. Actually, it was Yahoo then. It wasn't even Google. Way back. This is when Google was just kind of getting off the ground. Ended up leaving there to go and just, big company for me was never a fit. I'm kind of the same thing as Mike, not the greatest employee. I don't like to be in a box. I don't do real well when you tell me that's your silo, get off my toes, because I'm going to tell you what I think anyway. So ended up leaving and going out on my own and starting to really dig deeper into the SEO. And, you know, that was when AdWords was just coming out. It was a nickel a click. It was just amazing. But you could get tons of traffic to your site for $5, which was great. But anyway, after that, I decided to kind of do the startup thing. From one startup to another, you know, one would get bought, lay us all off. Another one would, you know, mismanage the sales process and lay us all off, you know, what have you. Did a few of those, and ended up finding a niche actually in, of all things, IT security later in my career, network monitoring, stuff like that. And just decided that between politics and, you know, still kind of being in a little bit of a box, I decided to just go out on my own because I had developed a pretty deep expertise in all basic digital marketing across the board with a heavy focus on SEO pay-per-click. So I started Return On Now 09, did that on the side while I was working for other folks, and ended up making the leap full-time in 2012 and haven't looked back. I've been doing this ever since. It's been great. I hope to be able to provide some insights that you guys can use.
Cool. My name's Lori. A lot of you know me, some of you don't. I'm happy to see some new faces here. My background's a little bit different than Tommy's, but kind of similar too. I haven't worked for a large corporation since the 90s, and I'm more of a contributor than somebody who wants to be managed. And in fact, I remember the last time I had somebody stand over my shoulder, and he was supposed to be my boss, but he wouldn't have understood my job anyway. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, the fastest way to get me to do nothing is to stand over my shoulder and watch." So he walked away. Anyway, I've been in startups since since the mid 90s. Originally, kind of got noticed on America Online by a couple of different companies in the financial services model industry. Worked for an angel financier and also administered their brokerage. Traded other people's money for a while, which is how I got started writing, and discovered I like teaching people and working with people a whole lot more than the hard sales process. And so that began my first consultancy, and then I sort of blew that up I blew it up. I didn't manage it well, and then took a job and ended up in e-commerce. And so I was able to take all those website planning. I'd never call me a programmer, but I was at the time kind of designing websites and setting up the content, the user journeys. And I started doing that before the turn of this century, which makes it sound older than it is, but it's still more than 2 decades I've been involved in this, and moved into e-commerce in the early 2000s and found my real spot, which is really helping companies grow. And because of having been in companies from the beginning, I've got this A to Z view of the entire value chain. So I do SEO. I don't do ad management. We may hire somebody for that. At this point, we refer all that out, because if we can't do it well, it's not worth doing. For us, we'd rather see our clients go someplace else for something we can't do well. Do a little conversion optimization. I would say at this point, we specialize in on-site, just really kind of applying best practices. And if we need somebody for testing who's got enough traffic for A/B testing, at this point, I send them towards AJ, because quite honestly, her level of expertise in that area is well beyond mine ever was. So, and she delights in doing that kind of stuff. So AJ, you're next. I'm going to introduce you too. So
thanks, Lori. I'm co-organizer with Lori. It's been a really great group over the years. I'm really excited for SEO today. As Lori mentioned, my background is in understanding how to turn those visitors that you're getting from all those SEO and advertising strategies, how to, once they're on your site, how to give them the optimal experience so that they ultimately do become a customer and engage with you. So we use a lot of engineering psychology and experimentation and a lot of fun data to really figure all that out. So really excited to hear the other piece of the other side of that puzzle today.
cool. Do you guys as a group want to introduce yourselves and what you do, or would you prefer to go in to start and ask some questions of Mike and Tommy? Consensus?
No one wants to hear about me, so let's jump in and learn about SEO.
Ask a question then, Kirby.
Well, the problem is I'm not the marketing guy. I'm the manufacturing and fulfillment guy. I'm just trying to learn. For me, the hard part, even if I learn something magical here, is feeding that information to my partner who handles all that stuff. So I'm not intelligent enough in this area to even ask a question. I don't even know what the basics are.
Why don't we start with that though, as a premise? Like, what are the basics? What do people, people who've never seen this before, what do they need to know before they start diving in deeper?
Mike?
Okay. At its simplest, so to understand how Google works, you kind of have to understand a little bit of where they came from and why they got started the way they did. Back before Google existed, the way that search engines worked primarily was they indexed the words on a page. And if you wanted to rank for blue widgets, whatever page had mentioned blue widgets the most times on their page, that was the page that the search engine would rank number one. of course, that started getting abused. And for any of you that were on the internet back then, you may remember going to websites where there was all this blank space at the bottom of the page, or looked like blank space. And if you actually highlighted over it, you would see there was actually words there that were blended into the background. And what happened was marketers were taking advantage of what search engines did. And, you know, if they wanted to rank for blue widgets, they would put blue widgets 1,000 times at the bottom of the page. And that way they would outrank everyone for blue widgets. And a lot of times you would find pages that were ranking for things that had, you know, they would rank for blue widgets, but they were actually trying to sell you dog houses or, you know, whatever. You would click on pages and end up on pages that had nothing to do with what you thought you were searching for. Google came along, and basically what they said is, okay, that's not working and the internet's getting bigger. We need to find a better way to rank pages. And not getting all technical and everything, but basically what they did is they said, okay, let's, you know, the text on the page is important. So we're going to keep that idea. We're going to look at some things like if a word's repeated over and over again, let's just kind of ignore that and not give credit for a word constantly being repeated. And the primarily thing that they did different was they incorporated links as, in really simple terms, you can think of as a vote. So if one page links to another page, that's a vote from that page, kind of endorsing the page that they're linking to. And they look at a whole bunch of it's gotten a lot more advanced since then, but they look at things like the what's called the anchor text, which is the text that the link is made up of. What words are in that anchor text. They look at the words around the link to kind of get an idea of what the link is supposed to be about, what the page that they're linking to is supposed to be about. And primarily, in the most simplest terms, Google ranks pages based on the text on the page and the links pointing to the page. That's most basic. Now, there's a ton of other factors. There's over 200 ranking factors, ton of other things that they get into. But at most simplest terms, the way Google ranks pages and other major search engines now is the text on the page and the links pointing to that page. Those are the primary things that impact rankings. It's a very basic overview. And I'll let Tommy jump in with anything else.
Okay, wouldn't let me unmute. Yeah, that's actually a really good. In fact, knowing the history is important. And I think folks who understand the history better actually do better work with SEO because they understand the spirit of what Google's doing with all the hand slaps when they penalize people or de-index people or send them warnings, all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure you've heard of this. There was an update in 2012, Penguin, where they were catching people cheating with their links and automatically creating links on hundreds of sites at a time through software. But they were garbage links, kind of like what Mike was just talking about. You'd have like a passage about, you know, FIFA soccer, but then they'd have Oakley sunglasses, exact match anchor text peppered through the content. And they would just go spam that to 100 sites. So Google really has added a lot of sophistication over the years to the point where now they're using machine learning and artificial intelligence to really estimate what the intent of the search is and then put the content in front of it that matches it, even if the keyword that you're targeting that was searched for isn't on the page where you're targeting it. So they've gotten really good at that. I actually, with clients and prospects, I kind of explain, I have a simplified model of SEO that I explain. I call it my 10-30-60 model. It's because there's really three pillars. There's sort of technical SEO, there's your on-page SEO, and there's your off-page. And Mike talked about the on-page and the off-page. The technical is really a lot of stuff. If you're like on Bigcommerce or Shopify or one of the existing platforms, your technical is probably pretty decent. It's like, can they crawl it? Is it fast? Does it look good on mobile phones? Those kind of things, right? That's 10% of the game, really. If you do that right, you do it once. You don't have to noodle with it every day, right? You're not really going to be changing the code significantly on a daily basis. It's 10%, but which is small, but it's also big because it's like the gate to the rest. If you screw that up, the rest doesn't matter. So think of it that way. So if you're on a good platform, you're halfway there. You're just about ready for the next part. The on page of the words on the page, right? That's 30%, because aside from like maybe if you want a blog to build links and stuff like that, which I consider part of off page, you're really going to build like your product description pages once, and you're not going to rewrite them every week or every day, right? You're going to want to do them right and leave them that way. And then the off page I call it 60%, because honestly, you should be building links in perpetuity. If you're not building links, you're not growing the authority of your website, which is going to make it hard for you to beat other people in the rankings. So it's almost like you're joining a race. The technical lets you in the race. The on page decides which lanes or which search results pages you're going to get to play on. And then the off page is really where you get to leapfrog people or run ahead of them and actually win the race. So you really have to coordinate all of these. And, I'm sure we're going to probably talk a lot more about on page here because that's what you control. But I do want to kind of piggyback Mike's comments, be thinking about how you can build links to your site, because over time, that's how you're eventually going to grow your business. So aside from advertising. So anyway, that's my little spiel about how I see SEO.
So we've got a bunch of questions piling up here, which is really cool. And I'm sort of picking through things. Guys, what do you think of AMP, especially as it pertains to e-commerce versus a content only site?
I'll let you go first this time.
It depends on how well your technical is done. If your technical is done in a way where it actually everything lines up with what Google wants to see, AMP is optional as far as product pages in my mind. For content, it's good to have because sometimes you're just going to have mobile phones. Some people still have old phones, right? And they simply cannot load a responsive website. So for content, you're really going to rank better if you implement AMP. So if you're blogging, I think you should take it seriously and try to get it done. For the product pages, yeah, it's good if you can get it, but don't break your site in an attempt to be on AMP, because really the experience of the page is what converts them. Some of what AJ would probably help you test and fix. You're taking the experience out. And on a conversion-driven website where literally your bread and butter is converting people to sales, you really don't want to water that down to the bare essentials. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I would say pretty much the same thing. I think AMP is it's too basic for my liking for a lot of, when you're trying to stick out from your competitors. I think it's too basic. I think it does depend on where you're marketing though. If you're marketing in the United States, most people in the US, we're not as good as we should be, but most people have a pretty decent internet connection. They're probably not gonna have trouble seeing your website on it. If you're marketing somewhere where internet is less reliable, like Australia notoriously has really bad internet for what they should be. And then you might want to look at AMP a little more because you get pages that load a little faster. The one thing I would caution though, going too heavy with it, is Google has a long history of launching things and abandoning them. And there's a lot of signs pointing towards that they're kind of starting to ignore AMP more and more. And sort of, I think it's not gonna be too much longer until they just kind of say, we don't really care about AMP anymore.
They're also being sued because it was considered a violation of antitrust because it favored people using their technology. For those who don't know what AMP is, it basically strips out a lot of the extraneous items on your page. So if you want people to read an article, for example, it's going to make reading it fast and easy. It's just going to load. But on e-commerce, especially when we talk about product and category pages, there's a lot of times there's things that you need there. I know initially AMP didn't work with variants, and I know it does now, but it's going to strip your user experience down so much, which is really what Tommy was saying, that we don't recommend it for product pages at all. And I think, you can already see if you look at their top news articles in Google, where it used to be all AMP pages, now it's usually a sprinkling. So that they seem to not be giving you any advantage to using it. So, I ultimately, and I know, I think everybody would agree that having a good user experience on mobile is really what you're shooting for. So if you could accomplish that with responsive design, that's probably a much better idea.
And actually, just can I add to that real quick before we jump to the next? There's an update coming up in May, the Google Page Experience update, where the way and the speed and the order in which your page loads is going to get more important. And Google has not gone on record about how accelerated mobile pages as a technology fits with that page experience update. And I've been trying to find it for 2 weeks now. So, you might want to be on a lookout for that, because they may announce that AMP's no longer recommended with that update. I have no idea. They're keeping it super close to the vest.
Guys, if you were, what would you consider the most effective way to drive traffic with SEO? This is such a big question. Blog posts, backlinks, meta tags, something else?
Yes.
Yes.
On all of them.
Maybe not meta tags so much, but yes.
Yeah.
One
of the beauties.
I was going to say,
Go ahead.
yes, please. I was going to say, talk to what the meta tags actually do from an SEO standpoint, because I think there's some misunderstandings in the e-commerce world.
Do you want to go first, Mike, or me? Either way.
Go ahead.
So the meta tags still matter. Google, the first thing they crawl is still the page title. If you can get at least your page title right, you're going to be better off than just letting whatever populate that happens to come up in the system. To me, it goes one level back. One of the beauties of e-commerce is that if your site's built well, you have a good hierarchy of sort of categories and then products and then detailed product descriptions, right? So you can win more easily on these long tail searches for the exact product you're selling than you can for trying to beat Amazon at a category that they also sell. So I'd really focus on getting our product descriptions real tight, figure out what long tail type keywords you want to target. You might look for longer tail keywords that actually include multiple keywords inside of them, so you can rank for different sort of what I call derivatives. And then, if you optimize the page with all custom descriptions, which is one thing that I see a lot of people in e-commerce. In fact, almost every time I come in to an e-commerce company, if they're drop shipping or whatever, they've got just copy and paste descriptions from the manufacturer. And that's just asking not to rank. You have to rewrite them. Try to make them personal. It's the whole, it's really about getting the whole page together in a way where it's talking to them in a unique way about your product, why they want it, why it's good for them. And then it's optimizing for something that you don't have to fight the big fish to win at, because let's face it, who's going to beat Amazon on a head-to-head battle? It's just not going to happen. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I would say, the meta title is obviously the most important one. That one is still weighted pretty heavily by search engines. And I would be, when I'm writing meta titles, if there's a primary keyword we're trying to rank for, put that towards the front of the title. Do not put your brand at the front unless you have a well-recognized brand. Now, you'll see some Amazon pages have their brand at the front. Actually, they switched this recently. Now I'm seeing it at the back, but they used to put their brand first and then the rest of the title. They could get away with that because, number one, they're Amazon, but also it actually helped their click-through rate, I think, because when people were scrolling down the search results and they see, oh, Amazon, they'll click on that because they know Amazon, they buy from Amazon all the time. They're more likely to click on that. If you have a brand that people don't know out there, you're not real big yet. Hopefully you get there, but it doesn't do you any good to put your brand first. So put that at the end of the title. Meta descriptions, like Tommy said, I think it's good to write custom ones for the product pages. For other pages, I'm actually a fan of leaving blank meta descriptions. And the reason that I do that is, and this is for like blog posts, like longer form content. And I got this from Wikipedia. Wikipedia does this. And I saw them doing it like 10 years ago and started kind of studying it and testing it myself. When you have longer form content, and you can't see this as much anymore, you can a little bit in Google Search Console, but Google Analytics, we used to years ago get all the keywords that somebody would search for would show up in your Google Analytics, that what they searched for and how they landed on your page. Now you get that not provided in your analytics. But you could see this a lot more. There are so many search variations that a page might rank for that you will never even think of to put in. And Google's said this before, that something like 60% of the searches they get a day are new searches that they've never seen before. So the reason I use blank meta descriptions on those is because if it's longer form content, there might be a couple different reasons why people would search for something that page is going to show up for. Google's gotten very good at understanding language, and I let them pick a blurb out of the description that matches the search intent better. You can never write a description that's going to match everyone's search intent for stuff like that. Now, specific products, that's different. It's a much more specific, much more narrow search. I would write for those, but for the longer form content, if you have that on your site, you may want to play with it, but I've been doing this for probably 10 years now. I leave those blank and let Google pick out the meta description. It's not something most SEOs do. And I know it's, probably if you surveyed 10 SEOs, 7 of them would tell you that you should write them yourself, but I've found it to work really well. Yeah. So, and to answer your question, the blog posting, yes, that's great. Links, yeah, you should really be doing all. I'm not going to say that there's one thing that's more important than everything else. You're baking a a final product, you should be doing a little bit of all of it.
Anything to add to that, Tommy?
Well, does everybody understand the purpose of a meta description in the first place? As he was explaining that, I wasn't sure if everyone understood what it is and how Google uses it. This may be remedial for everyone, but you can designate to Google a description of the page that you're suggesting that they use on the SERP itself. So when they show it, you know, the blue link on the top with your page title, which is where that shows up, and that little blurb underneath is you either get to tell them what it is and they accept it, or they're going to just pick something off the page. The reason that on some types of content you absolutely have to do the meta descriptions because they'll just show your navigation or something ridiculous. But I agree on blog posts. More often than not, we don't put custom meta descriptions on that because we want Google to mix and match and rank it semantically. That's the goal. And so I do agree with Mike on that point. But product pages, services pages, you know, even if you can do it on the category pages, it helps to do a custom meta description because category pages can often bring the ugliest meta descriptions you've ever seen. It'll just be a listing of subcategories or something like that with just like ... between them. So yeah, on content, I agree. It's optional. But overall, I mean, just note, you have an opportunity to tell Google what the quote ad text, sort of what your pitch is going to be on the SERP. On pages that you really put a lot of effort into trying to get people in to convert, you want to go ahead and do that to say, A, what to expect on the page, and B, why click me instead of all this other noise? Because there's semantic stuff at the top, maybe knowledge graph, it might be a local map, there's PPC ads, there's sidebar stuff. How do you stand out? The meta description is one of the ways you can increase your click-through rate on like evergreen type content, like I was talking about, like your specific product detail pages. So
Cool. Can you pretty much define the difference between a well-optimized product page and an over-optimized product page?
Mike, I'll jump in real quick on this as I was talking. Basically, don't keyword stuff it. If you're targeting one like kind of head term, like shorter tail keyword, if it appears on that page more than maybe 2 or 3 times, you're probably overdoing it. Especially if it's in the description like 5, 6 times, that actually can hurt you more than help you. So you use natural language, use the keyword, and then try to find different like synonyms and use those. Try to find longer and shorter tail versions of it and use those, because that'll help Google cast a larger net when they're trying to match you to search to actual searches, versus you just hammering one keyword. Well, for one thing, you may be talking yourself out of every other keyword, but you also may be showing Google that you're trying a little too hard. And it kind of comes across as some of that spammy stuff that Mike talked about, where they used to cloak keywords and stick them in the footer. You just don't want to do that. So that's my angle.
Yeah, I would say over optimization is it's a lot like that famous quote from the Supreme Court in the pornography case, where I'll know it when I see it. It's a lot like that. It's, and I see it more with local websites. For example, I live in York, Pennsylvania, and I can almost guarantee I can find a site out there that right now there's a dentist that has a site where their homepage says, if you're looking for a York, PA dentist, you will find no better York, PA dentist than this York, PA, and they'll just keep repeating it over and over and over again. I know that page exists somewhere in my town. I have no doubt. That's over optimization. Like that's, if you can read your content and it sounds weird to you, you're probably over optimizing.
Right,
if it flows normal. Yeah, if it flows normal and it reads okay, then you're probably you're fine.
And to add to that, one of the things I like to do for content is I like to find a topic cluster, keyword cluster. So you find 3 or 10 or 15 keywords that are all real similar, but they're all just slightly different. And you pick the ones that have higher volume and not too much competition. If you have a tool that can analyze that, if you don't, you're kind of guessing. So you may want to have someone come in and assist you with it. But you pick those and you just you mix and match which one you use where. So you'll take the most important one, try to get in maybe the page title and the headline, and put the other ones in the copy. And at the end of the day, you can keep it sounding natural, but still target a keyword. And that's the holy grail of on page, really. So that's what you want to do.
Yeah, and on top of that, I would say one thing, Google's gotten a lot more advanced than they were, say, 12 years ago. Pages rank for things that the term never shows up on the page. You don't have to have a term on the page to rank for that term necessarily. Like Google's smart enough to understand, going back to the dentist example I used, if a page ranks for York, PA dentist, they should also rank for dentist York, PA. well, I had Skype on and didn't realize it. I got to get off of that. So they're smart enough to understand similar terms, and if a page ranks for this term, it should probably rank for this term also. So you don't have to, fit in every variation of a keyword necessarily. I'd put the primary ones that you really want to rank for, but you don't have to, squeeze in 20 of them just because they're slightly different. You'll probably end up ranking for them whether you try to or not.
Cool. Do you think it's a good idea to add a descriptive text on a category page to help give Google a little more to crawl than just the products on the page?
Yeah, why not? I wouldn't overthink this. Yes, absolutely. The more description you can put on the page, the more you can do to tell. Here's the thing: if you land on the page and you don't know what the page is about, then Google doesn't either, probably. So the more you can do to tell search engines what the page is about and what type of people would find that page useful, and what type of search queries should land on that page, the more you can do it. There's no reason not to. It's certainly not going to hurt your rankings.
Yeah, actually, I've worked with a couple of pretty good sized e-commerce companies here in Austin over the past 5 years, where they had category pages that would come up and just list products, and they weren't doing well. They weren't ranking at all. And I actually had them do this exercise, go through and write content for all of them on both sides. And in both cases, we started seeing more traffic landing on their category page. So it worked in both tests that I'm talking about. One of them had a huge issue that they didn't like the user experience of a big blurb of content at the top of the page. And you really don't want to just bury it at the bottom, because then it just looks like an SEO trick. So what we did is we just put an accordion in that said, read more about why this category is important. And it would hide when you loaded it, but Google could crawl it. So it wasn't hard to code. It didn't take long at all. You just pop it open and read it, or Google can crawl that, and then you have exactly what Mike was talking about. So one
little trick, if you have a good programmer that works for you, that you can do in a situation like that. And this is something I also got from Wikipedia. Wikipedia does this. Wikipedia has navigation at the top of their screen. They have navigation on the left, but they're a unique site that their navigation doesn't matter. Like, nobody uses Wikipedia as navigation. Most websites aren't like that. So what they do is, if you actually look at the code of the page, the navigation links are at the end of the site, after the code, but they're using styling programming to make it show at the top. And not to get super advanced at how you do this or anything, but you could do the same thing if you have a situation where you don't necessarily want a big blurb at the top, but you want it there for search engines. You can mess around with the code that it shows up first in the code, but then you can style it that it shows up at the end of the product listings or something like that. If you want it somewhere else, you can make it show up wherever you want with some styling on the page.
One of our favorite tricks is to have the intro blurb on top, and then underneath the products on the page. I have one client, we actually put in the accordion, but what we did was we put in kind of frequently asked questions for that product category. And then we use schema so that Google knows those are questions and answers. And that can help you gain the knowledge panels up on top. So that was one that actually worked real well for the store we did that with. So, there's lots of ways to skin a cat, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, the accordion's a great solution too.
Yeah, and I'd love to throw in some data from the user experience side too. We've done a lot of testing of the accordion versus the static block, and test after test shows that you need to have the products high enough on the page. So just wanted to echo that from a different perspective.
Yeah, the big block of text and everything down below, people get there and they don't see any products and they think they're in the wrong spot. So, so what are your tools for analyzing keyword popularity, and maybe even, SEMRush was supposed to have a representative here to talk to their tool, but I think everybody in here who does SEO is pretty familiar with that tool. You guys want to talk a little bit about how you would use the tools to figure out what keywords, or the clusters that you were talking about, Tommy, and even perhaps structuring internal linking to support, to support the keywords you're trying to rank for?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. So my preferred tool is SEMRush. It's actually the one I use, which is why I was kind of excited to be on a panel with this guy. So I thought maybe I
Me
could throw a
too.
question at him. It's got a real good setup. There's a tool called the Keyword Magic tool. You can go in there and you put in the core term you're trying to research, and it'll just give you maybe thousands in some cases of keyword options. It actually provides you with a whole bunch of data for both PPC and SEO, because it was originally a PPC tool, right? Hence the name SEMRush. So, but what they give you for SEO is they give you the monthly average search volume in the US and this metric called keyword difficulty. It is basically a 0 to 100% score. And it's basically how complicated is it to rank? So how strong are the domains that you're trying to beat out on the first couple, 3 pages? Because really anything after the 3rd page doesn't, I mean, no one's clicking through to buy something on page 4 usually, unless they literally can't find the product they want. Nobody's selling it with a proper description. So, so it tells you how hard it is. I kind of do for SEO strategy projects I do for clients, usually I'll do a cutoff around 80%. Anything above 80% I figure is non-achievable unless your own website authority is like way up at the top half of the scale. But the lower the better. So things that have a 0 keyword difficulty means that nobody's targeting an exact match of it. And that means that theoretically that even if you have a pretty new site, you have a shot at ranking for it. Of course, with all the machine learning and the semantic stuff and the intent-based matching, that may or may not be the case because it's not exact match anymore, right? Google's doing the synonym matching that Mike was just talking about. But still, it's a real good tool. Ahrefs has a similar metric. I can't recall the name of the one because I haven't used Ahrefs in probably 6 months. But they also have equivalents. So you can pull down the monthly search volume and you can pull down some sort of scale to benchmark how hard it's going to be to rank for something. And of course, both of them have good SEM tools on as well. Just a related question about domain authority, if I can just take that too while I'm on here. Both of those tools have domain rating or domain authority score type features built in, but Moz also has sort of the industry de facto standard a lot of people use. So you can pick any of them. I just don't like Moz's platform personally. So just wanted to get that out. Mike, feel free to jump in if I missed anything here.
Sure. No, I've been using SEMRush since 2015. I think it's definitely my preferred tool. I've used Ahrefs on and off a few times here and there when I've needed to. The one thing I will say, Ahrefs does a lot of the same stuff, but their keyword data is garbage right now. And it has been for a little over a year. They lost one of their big sources that they got keyword data from was this service called JumpShot. They lost that. And since then, they haven't figured out a way to fix that gap. So their keyword data has been just kind of all over the place since then. So I wouldn't really rely on them for that. Now, they are the gold standard for researching competitors' links and finding links that are out there. They still have the best database for that. Nothing, some of them are kind of close, but they're still the gold standard for that. SEMRush, I absolutely love. I've been accused of being a shill for them many times. I think it's an awesome tool. It's awesome for paid marketing. They do it better than anyone out there. If you want to research what kind of ads your competitors are running on Google, you can find some great data on that. One of my favorite tools that they have is actually, I think they just call it the keyword gap tool, where you can put in, I think it's up to 4 competitors plus your website, and you can see what keywords they're ranking for and you're not ranking for. You can see what keywords you're both ranking for, but they're ranking better than you. You can see what keywords you're outranking them. There's all kinds of ways you can play around with it. And it's I'm someone, I think it's absolutely stupid to start your keyword research from 0. You have competitor, unless you're selling a brand new product nobody's ever thought of before, or a brand new service. There's competitors out there that have already figured that, they've already made all the mistakes and figured out what works and what doesn't. So just figure out what they're doing and do it better. So I love them for competitor research. Like I said, the advertising. I don't use their keyword difficulty score all that much. I'll go against a little bit what Tommy said here on that, only because I found that most of these products that have a keyword difficulty score don't do it really well. So I'll look at them, I'll glance at them, but they're inaccurate sometimes. So don't make your final decision just based on a score, because you may skip out on some keywords that would be good otherwise. Also, don't, you may go after some keywords that are actually a little bit more difficult than maybe they appear according to these tools. As far as domain authority, I think domain authority from Moz is one of the most damaging things to the SEO industry that's ever come along. It's a completely useless metric. There's absolutely no reason to look at it. Domain authority, so Google doesn't rank domains, they rank pages. And domain authority doesn't tell you anything about the strength of the page that you're up against. So that's, and I think a lot of people don't understand that. So just seeing, a bunch of sites with high domain authority doesn't mean that it's difficult to rank in that particular search, because the actual pages themselves might be fairly weak. But domain authority doesn't tell you that. If domain authority mattered, Facebook would rank for everything, and they don't really rank for most things. Or even sites like Tumblr have really high domain authority. You don't see them ranking for much of anything generally. So I would be very careful, and whether it's Moz or SEMRush or Ahrefs, looking at any of the domain metrics, I would just caution against that. I don't think they're very helpful. The only exception I'll make to that is because what they're measuring is the strength of the domain as a whole, and most of it's based on the links pointing to the domain. If it's a homepage ranking, it's going to be a little bit more accurate than if it's an internal page ranking, if that makes sense.
Which also is relevant to if you're purchasing backlinks. They'll tell you you've got this great big high ranking domain, and that does help, but ultimately the page you're going on is probably brand new on the site, and you have no idea if it's even going to pull any traffic, let alone a whole lot of domain strength.
Something I've been saying for a long time, and there's, in my opinion, no exceptions to this. Anybody who's selling links based on domain authority is either incompetent because they don't understand what domain authority really is, or they're a scammer. They're just taking advantage of people that don't know any better. There's no exceptions, in my opinion.
Tommy, your thoughts on that?
Moz does have a page authority metric too, which I don't find super accurate, but at least it's something.
Which I don't know why people don't look at that instead.
Yeah, when we're actually doing link acquisition, we look at both, because if I can get a link from a domain authority website of 70, and the page might be a 3, and it's passing a whole lot less than if the domain's like a 17 and the page is a 25, right? So yeah, I actually look at both. There are some free domain authority checkers online where you can see both. It'll tell you the actual URL, the domain's authority, and the page. So if you want to go to that level, it's available. They usually limit the number of queries you can do in a day, but if you're sitting around just searching authorities, you're probably not actually doing any work. You're just kind of doing busy work. So if you have an opportunity to place a link somewhere and you get to choose what page it comes from on a site, then that's something I think you should actually look at. At the end of the day, even lower authority pages do have a little bit of the domain authority that will filter over, but it's true, you're not getting full strength on a page by page basis, if it's a brand new page especially. So,
well, and that depends on the link structure of the site. There's a lot of people who sell links on, they call them high DA links. And this goes back, people used to do it with high page rank links when page rank was published. But what it ends up being is you get a link on a profile page, which there's nowhere from, there's no link path from the homepage of that site to that profile page where your link is. Half the time you have to log in to even for anyone to see it, which means Google can't even see the link anyhow. So it really depends on the link structure of the site and where the page is going to be that your link is on in relation to kind of the home page. If you have to click through 50 links to get to that page, and it's buried that deep on the site, you're probably not getting much benefit from the actual authority of the site.
Right. But honestly, one of the things that I talk a lot about with clients is domain diversity, because they just want to get like a couple killer links from some big websites. Sometimes you'll look at those websites and you think, wow, this is the real deal. If you run them through like a third-party tool, they don't really get a lot of traffic, even though they have a lot of domain authority, which is a red flag, right? And so I actually put them through a bunch of checks when I do them this way. And I would prefer to get a bunch of middling domains to link to someone with optimized anchor text that doesn't overstuff it, right? Because you can over-optimize your link profile too. So you got to be careful there as well as on the page. But I'd rather do that because I actually see faster lifts. It might just be like a link insertion campaign because we do some of that. And those are pages that are already published, they're already indexed, they have established authority, you can actually analyze it. So there are more savvy ways to do link building than just sort of aiming for a site that looks like a big fish. I agree with that.
And you mentioned the over optimizing your link anchor text. Just to piggyback off that, because I get asked about that a lot, and my clients ask me about that a lot. And I have a simple rule I've been using. This is even before Penguin came out. I'm using this for 12, 13 years now. If you're wondering what the anchor text should be for a link to a page, a really simple rule I use is your anchor text should either describe why you're linking to that page, or it should describe what the page is about you're linking to. And if you just do one of those two things every time you're building a link, you'll be fine. You won't over optimize your anchor text. You won't run into any problems. It's good for your users because it's explained, because they can see, okay, I know what that link is about, why I would click over there. And it's also good for search engines. It's describing what the page is about or why you're linking to it. And if you follow that, you'll never run into any issues with anchor text.
Absolutely. Yeah, one thing that I recommend to people is to use longer strings as the link instead of, like, say, for my website, we track Austin SEO because in Austin, we want to show up high for Austin SEO. If I were building links to my page that I want to rank for that, I'm not going to almost never rank for strictly Austin SEO. If you're operating a business in Austin, SEO should be a requirement, right? Something like that. Link that whole thing. It doesn't hurt you to have a long link. It can only help you in regards to what Mike was just talking about.
Cool. These are two questions, but they're quite related. So the first question is, when analyzing links, what is the reason for spammy sites linking to your product pages? How do they create these links? How does that benefit them? And does it hurt your own ranking? And then the second question, which again, they're similar in their topic. Is there a thought on disavowing links if tools like SEMRush gives you a big list of toxic links, but you have no manual actions in Search Console? Google doesn't seem to say don't disavow unless you've had a manual action taken. But what should they be doing with those things?
Yeah, with the disavow tool, I'll say this goes back to when it first came out. What Google has always preached is it's a tool that it's a scalpel, not a machete. It's something you should use very limited, very targeted. It's not something you should just go hacking away and disavowing all the links that you think are a little fishy. Now, things were a little different back then. And when Penguin, which is an algorithm that Google launched to kind of combat spammy links, when that first came out, it often heavily penalized sites that were using spammy links. And so legitimate website owners had more of an issue with it. If somebody threw a bunch of bad links at them, it could hurt their pages. So people were using it a lot more often. Today, Google has updated Penguin several times now that they more or less ignore bad links. They don't really penalize unless you go way overboard. And you have to be really, I know somebody who has a setup that used to build like 1 million links an hour. You have to be on that kind of setup to really trigger some sort of penalty from them for spammy links. They mostly just ignore them. You're more likely to do damage to your site than help it by disavowing links most of the time, because sometimes those spammy links are actually helping a little bit. They're not great, but sometimes Google hasn't recognized them as bad links. You may think it's bad, but Google hasn't yet identified it as a bad link. So by disavowing it, you're actually, I can't count the number of people I've had come to me, show me, hey, we did this disavow, we disavowed a bunch of links not too long ago and our rankings plummeted. And that was, what we got rid of the disavow file, rankings returned a few weeks later. I would be very careful, and I definitely would never, ever, ever disavow a link because some third-party tool told me it was toxic. Okay, I love SEMRush, but I use that as a notification that I should go take a look at the link myself, and I make that determination myself. I would never just, grab a list of links just because SEMRush or any other tool told me they were toxic and start disavowing.
The only case where I disagree with that is if they're obviously like from porn sites or something like that, which client I'm working with over the summer, we had their traffic tumbled off a cliff for no reason in a matter of 3 weeks. And then we went into SEMRush to research it, and what we found is there's actually a keyword cloud in there. They'll show you like your top keywords for your anchors, and it was all really unsavory stuff like gay porn and things like that. And so then we were like, hold on, let's go do a dig. And it come to find out someone had done what we call a negative SEO attack. They were being link spammed by a third party on horrible sites with horrible anchor texts, and they stopped ranking. They maybe still rank for some of their good keywords, but they stopped ranking for anything. Google just basically hammered them across the board. That was when the disavow should be used. That's an exact example, because I cleaned up their links and they were back where they were within like a month, and within 2 months they were higher than they started out. So you do want to watch for that. So pay attention. If you don't want to pay for SEMRush, go to the Google ad tool and put in your domain as the core thing to search for the keywords, and just see what comes up. And if you're seeing stuff like that, then you need to bring someone in to help and get that cleaned up. So just to give you an example when you would use it, because I do agree with everything Mike said. You have to be real careful because you can mess up your site otherwise.
Yeah, I should have added that caveat. If you see, so Google has two types of penalties. One is a manual penalty, which you get a notification in Google Search Console from. And the other is algorithmic, which you don't get any kind of notification. You just have to kind of play a guessing game of what caused it. If you see rankings drop, traffic drop, and can correlate that with new links that have appeared, then yeah, absolutely, that's a case where you would want to disavow those.
Yeah, that's really the only time I recommend people use it now, unless a bunch of toxic links come up that are obviously things you don't want linking to you and that are probably hurting you. Especially if they don't carry any. There's actually the tool will tell you how strong their site is. And if it's like a 0, just get rid of it. It's not helping you at that point.
Yeah.
Especially if it's from an unsavory domain or topic or whatever like that.
So a question for both of you. We know these tools give off a lot of signals and either things to do or things to fix that are maybe not things you should touch. Do you have, what are your caveats when using this tool? Or quite frankly, the page speed insights is another one that people don't seem to fully understand, but is definitely related to your ranking.
I can tell you one that drives me nuts on SEMRush. If you run an audit through SEMRush, they flag pages for they call low HTML to text ratio, where meaning there's a lot more code than there is text on the page. And I just think that's an absolutely stupid thing to even worry about. I've never seen any evidence that any search engine cares about that. It could be a sign that maybe you have too much, maybe you have a bad coder and there's some bloat on your pages that you could get rid of, but I've never seen it be something that is worth worrying about. I'd have to pull up a SEMRush audit to go. There's a couple things like that they tend to flag that I just don't think are worth worrying about. Core Web Vitals is, I honestly don't think it's going to have much of an impact on search rankings. You should be optimizing your page for speed and for the user experience anyhow for conversions, 100%. And if you're not doing that, you're leaving money on the table anyways. So you should be doing that. But I don't think when this update comes out, Google has a long history of announcing these major updates, and then when they launch, kind of nothing happens or very little happens. There's an example a few years ago, they decided that HTTPS and SSL was a ranking signal. That launch, nothing happened really. In fact, a lot of people who switched initially saw ranking drops.
Yeah.
Mobile Geddon was a big update they had where everyone had to be mobile friendly. I tracked tons of sites that were not mobile friendly. Their rankings actually got stronger when the update came out in some cases, and other ones just stayed the same. They do a lot of these things. Now, down the road, they may turn up the dial a little bit and make it a bigger factor, but it's not something I would get overly concerned about if your page loads well and it's accessible right away to users. That's the most important thing.
It's interesting because the HTTPS thing, we had the same situation that we had clients who decided to update it, but then they made some mistakes in the process where for example, in the content, they would have links to images on their own domain that showed as HTTP. And you can audit this in SEMRush, which is a feature I actually really like about the platform. It'll help you find all these pages that have one element that's making the page insecure. Because what happened later, Google decided, well, we didn't move the needle too much with this, other than making people kind of jump through the hoop. But then they added a flag on Chrome where now it says, caution, this page is insecure. So then they forced everyone to go ahead and start moving HTTPS because it's going to show you now, and you have to decide, am I okay going to this site or not? So that became an issue. So they really forced it through other means, which I thought was interesting. So going back to the original question though, one of the things that does drive me crazy with these audit tools is they'll show you like 15,000 warnings for pages that you have no index on. And it's like, oh, you got to do all these things. Well, it's all of my category pages, all of my tag pages, all of them are no index because it's a bad user experience on a blog to have someone plop in on a random tag that has 3 entries, or maybe another tag has the same 3 entries. And they're like, oh, it's duplicate content. Well, no, it's a listing page. That's why it's no indexed. So you have to sort through and have an ability to understand which of those are garbage and which are useful. On the core web vitals, I've actually been reading up a lot on that, and I don't know if it's just how SEO folks are selling it now, that it's the most important thing to get right or not, but there's a lot of talk about that being released so we could prepare for the page experience update. I'm kind of expecting it to be a yawn when it comes out. At the same time, I've got half my clients coming to me saying, hey, I'm getting scared. This is coming out. We keep fixing the performance, but this one is still below 70% or whatever. Core Web Vitals is telling me I'm poor across the board. And I mean, I'll look at their website. Their website's great. It might have a few too many plugins, but other than that, they're fine. So I think we're gonna have to just let it hit and see if it causes anything at this point, because it could be much ado, or who knows, it could be something. It's not gonna be like Penguin where they were just hammering people across the board. And I mean, they did try to warn us with that one, but people didn't listen. I had a client that fixed the links on their homepage for Penguin and didn't fix the rest of the site. And I warned them the next year, hey, they're going to come back and they're going to go deeper in the site with the second wave. And they're like, yeah, whatever. And an entire section of their website got de-indexed overnight. It was like, I think it was 12% of their traffic gone, like from one day to the next. So it's just hard to know which ones to get worried about. So the trick is, if you're following the rules and sticking to what Google's guidelines say, for the most part, you should be okay.
And anytime these major updates come out, Google's objective is not to throw chaos into the SERPs and change everything around. They're trying to tweak things, fine tune them a little bit. I bet if you pick out 20 or 30 of your favorite websites and sites that you visit the most right now and run them through Core Web Vitals tests, they'll fail. They'll do horribly, and you'll find this with a lot of the most popular and most best ranking websites out there. They are not, they fail Core Web Vitals pretty badly. And if Google made this a major ranking signal, the search results are going to have the biggest change that they've ever had at one time, and I just don't see them wanting to do that.
I mean, it's one factor out of what, 1,500, I think was the last number I heard that they do in a year. So yeah, maybe it counts as 5, but whatever, it's still in the grand scheme, I agree.
Yeah, the classic example I give is recipe sites, because I'm a cook and I'm always looking at stuff. And especially if you put them on a small screen like an iPad, and these things are so full, they break every single rule except schema. You've got a pop here and a pop here and a pop here and a pop here and a pop here. And sometimes the page sits for 2 minutes and then crashes completely. Yeah. And yet these are all, I mean, in fact, the same sites tend to rank no matter what I'm searching. So clearly, and of course the recipes are great, which gets down to my core rule for SEO, is that if you've got a good user experience, if your page is useful to the people who land on it, that's probably the strongest signal. Although you do have to have traffic, no traffic, no engagement. But if you have people coming to your page and they're loving your page and they're doing what you want them to do on your page, then you got a pretty good page. And that's really all Google wants to deliver, is the top results for that. We have one more question here, and then I think we have to wrap it up. A little bit off topic, but I think it's a fair question. Do you have any specific advice for PPC, keyword research, or competitive research within SEMRush?
Mike, do you want to take that first, since you mentioned competitive before? I'll jump in.
Yeah. One thing I love to do with competitor research in SEMRush is go, and this takes some time. You really have to sit down and look at it. But I love going back and finding the history of their ads and just looking at a competitor's ads. Like, sometimes you'll see, okay, for 2 months they were running ads with this headline and they haven't run an ad with that headline ever again. So they kind of did the testing for you that headline probably doesn't work. And just seeing how they've changed their ads over time, I think you can, if you really sit down and spend some time with it, you can get you can get knowledge that would take you hours and more importantly, thousands of dollars probably of testing by seeing what the competitors have done over time, how they've changed their ads, what are they highlighting, what are they prominently talking about in their ads. And that I think is probably as valuable as anything that you can find in a tool like SEMRush. Because, besides the keyword research, figuring out what ads work is probably the next most important thing.
That's exactly how I would have started out the question, is by sort of cheating on their ads, because I do this a lot. Folks have me come in, they want me to audit their account. I look at their ads and maybe they're getting a decent click through, no conversion, or maybe not. Maybe they're paying like a real high amount per click. And I'll get them to show me the competitors and go and just look at their ads and see what I think is working. The thing about SEMRush for this responsive ads is it appears to only show what the actual ad text is on the impression, versus there's no way for them to see the whole responsive ad. So you can get a lot of data fast if someone's using responsive ad formats, which is sort of the default now, right? Google's trying to push everyone to do that. But the other one is you can actually see the percentage of their traffic that's coming from a keyword, both organically and through paid. So it's a good way for you to kind of look at where's their bread and butter, and is that something I can beat them at, or do I need to flank them with something they're not doing? And so I'll analyze that as well. Unfortunately, we can't figure out the structure that's working for them. If I could get to that level, man, that would be money. But yeah, I mean, it's probably the same answer as Mike said, just worded a different way.
Yeah, before SEMRush did the PPC thing, I used to use SpyFu to kind of see the same kind of thing, what people were doing and what was working, and actually found it to be really helpful in terms of jump-starting a new ad campaign. So kind of fun.
Yeah, one thing I think people overlook too is how helpful an ad campaign is for SEO. That's the best way to do keyword research and to figure out what keywords work, and for testing, nothing hurts more than to spend 3 months or 6 months trying to rank for a keyword and then find out it doesn't convert as well as you thought it would. You can find that out within a week or less in with a pay-per-click campaign and save yourself a buttload of time.
Yep, absolutely.
Let's wrap up with something we didn't really talk about, which is actually really important for both advertising, especially for advertising, but even for SEO, is intent. It's intent, because you can rank very easily for keywords that are high up on the buyer funnel. But if you're, let me preface this. I've seen quite a few sites that have fabulous organic traffic, but it's not buying traffic. And it's because the keywords that they're scoring well and ranking for aren't buying decision type topics. So if one of you want to talk a little bit about intent.
Yeah, it really comes down to a couple things, like A, where are you using specific keywords and specific types? And B, how well have you set up your website to push people through the funnel? If you're ranking for a lot of early funnel stuff, but then you're not really giving any nudge to folks to go in the right direction where they can spend money, you're just getting traffic and they'll bounce and leave. So if you're going to blog, put a call to action on the blog, or link to products in the text, internal linking. Definitely always internal link if you're blogging. If you're doing PPC though, I try to just get rid of all the early funnel stuff, because all it does is spend money and they don't convert. So we try to go mid funnel, like people who are actually already at the stage where they know what solution they want, and it's getting in front of them saying we have that solution, so they can, when they hit consideration, which is one step away, you're hopefully in the front of the line before they go and do the competitive research on their own and figure out what other alternatives are. So it's really, I use different things and different tactics, but the big deal is you've got to find a way to get people off of the content and into a buying funnel somewhere, or you're going to have what Lori's talking about, a lot of traffic that just kind of visits and leaves. And that actually is not good, because that can hurt your engagement metrics and that can hurt your ranking. So it all ties together.
Yeah, I'd say one of the biggest mistakes I see on e-commerce sites is the site's not doing a good job of matching the search intent with the right landing page. If let's say you're selling drones and somebody is searching for, the best drone for taking aerial photography, you don't necessarily want them landing on a specific product. You want them landing on a page about, here's a list of, drones for different types of photography. You want them landing more on a blog page, whereas if they're searching for a specific model or a specific type of drone, then you want to match them with, the drone product page. So I see that a lot where and you can tell right away when you look at the analytics by the exit percentage and the bounce percentage that people are getting traffic on product pages that should be going to their early funnel searches, and they should be going to a page devoted to getting them into a funnel and in, like Tommy was talking about, into your sales process and remarketed to maybe things like that, versus and vice versa. You'll get people who are ready to buy, but you're sending them to a page that doesn't, that isn't tailored for them. So I always, one of the first things we do working with e-commerce sites is we pull up a search report and looking at what terms are landing on what pages, and which ones make sense and which ones do we need to create a new page or work on getting the search term, a different page ranked higher for that search term that makes more sense to get them in the funnel.
Well, guys, we're still getting questions in, but I think it's time for us to wrap it up. This recording will end up on YouTube, and we'll send it out to people who attended. Thank you, gentlemen, both. I always love to have really great guests.
Thank you.
Thanks for all the great questions, everyone. This has been fun.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, guys.
And Lori, for having us.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
Anytime. Great. Thank you, everybody. And thanks to all who attended and asked fabulous questions. This was great fun. Take care, everybody. Stay well.
See you guys.
Bye.